Hello and welcome to the third video in our four-part series on the new Mission Control component for Security Center. In this video series we'll take an in-depth look at what Mission Control can do, how to install and configure the software, different configuration options we can use for incidents, and how operators would be using Mission Control for monitoring and reporting. In the first two videos we took a look at what Mission Control is from a high-level concept perspective, looked at a few examples showing how Mission Control can be used, then went through the installation process, configured the Incident Manager role, and created a basic incident. In this video, we'll go into the advanced features that can be used when configuring incidents, which are triggers and workflows. In our final video, we'll go over all the details needed for incident monitoring from an operator's perspective, and how we can get more information from the reporting task for administrators. The Mission Control Rules Engine. Before we take a look at the rules engine itself, let's take a quick look at a diagram showing the general information flow through Security Center for an incident. The incident starts with some kind of internal or external event, or it can be manually created. An event that's internal to Security Center can come from a door, a camera, an intercom, or some other entity like that. We can also get events from external systems, such as an intrusion panel, a fire alarm, another access control system, and various sensors that can be attached to hardware around the site. These events are constantly being monitored by Security Center, and any alarms or events are passed on to various components that enhance situational awareness, such as the incident monitoring task, the security desk, and the mobile apps. Our rules engine is also constantly looking at these events to see how they might apply to incidents. In Security Center, we have different workflows that help to standardize the response, such as access rules and alarm procedures. There's usually some back and forth information passing between these workflows and our actual situational awareness tools. In the end, all of this is of course passed on to a database for reporting purposes, where we store everything needed for logging, auditing, searching, and for exporting. The components in purple here are everything that's being used by Mission Control. So we have our rules engine, we have our incident monitoring task, we have our workflows, and of course we use databases to keep all this information. Let's take a look at how the actual rules engine works. So we can have various events that come in on the system, such as alarms or events triggered by entities. We can also have manual events that are triggered by operators. All of these events pass through a rules engine where it checks to see if any of the events are relevant to any of the incidents, specifically in the triggers section that we have set up. The rules engine helps in correlation and aggregation of these events in that it keeps track of which events have come in case there's other events that depend on them, and it also passes the events on so it can be reported in the database. If all the incoming events cause a set of rules that are in the trigger section for an incident to be passed, then the incident is triggered. Let's take a quick look at a very basic incident where we do have some of the advanced features activated. On top we have the events that actually define the rule, which can be one single event, or we can actually add multiple ones here. And below that we also have the source entity for that event. We can pick one entity or we can pick multiple ones here as well. Below that, we have three kinds of conditions we can add to a rule. We have the occurrence, which determines the number of times that we want the actual events in the rule to pass. We have the interval, which basically determines how long this rule will stay active until it gets reset. And then below that, we have the event filtering. We have two options there, where we can say that we want no other events to come in from that source entity, or we can actually say that there's a specific group of events that can occur and the rule will still stay active. Let's take a look at some best practices, and we'll start by looking at a situation where we get events from multiple sources. So when we're setting up our triggers for a particular incident, we want our first rule to be that we get a door access denied from any source. Then if we want to trigger the incident, we also want to get a door forced open that occurs twice. We're going to count this as rule 2 and 3 because we need the rule to pass twice in order to trigger the incident. So in our scenario, if we're looking at the main entrance, if we get a door access denied, then we get a door forced open on the main entrance, and then we get a door forced open again, we want to trigger the incident. In the second set of rules, we have it listed as from any source. So let's take a look at what might happen in a real-world environment. First thing that happens is we get a door access denied on the main entrance. So that's fine, we passed rule number 1. Then we get a door forced open, but this comes in from our side door. Of course, we have from any source listed here, so that actually passes as rule number 2. And then we get a door forced open on the main entrance. Since we do have any source listed here, that actually passes rule number 3 and we get an incident triggered, but it's not really the incident that we had in mind since it's not all happening on the main entrance. So let's take a look at how we would fix that. Looking at our second set of rules, rule 2 and 3, now we want to use the door forced open from the previous source, and we want this again to occur 2 times. So in this scenario, let's say our main entrance gets a door access denied, so that passes rule 1. And then we get a door access denied on the side door, and that passes rule 1 for the side door, but it starts that in a separate tree. Then we get a door forced open on the main entrance, that passes rule number 2. And then we get another door forced open, but this is on the side door. Now, since we do have this set to from previous source, it's not going to count that in our main entrance tree. We get a door forced open again, and this is on our side door, and we can see that this completes the actual process on the side door tree, and that's going to trigger the incident on the side door. After that, we get a door forced open on the main entrance again, and that's going to complete the incident, and we're going to get an incident pop up on the main entrance on our map. So this is really exactly what we do want to see. We want the incident to happen for the specific entity, and not to have the different events that come in get mixed up and trigger different parts of different incidents. So let's take a look at another best practice, and that's to stop the looping of incidents. So looking at our triggers section, we have 2 rules. We have a door forced open from the main entrance, and then we want that door forced open from the main entrance to happen again. And that will trigger our incident. Of course, we could have just put the occurrence to 2 times here as well, but just to break it up, I wanted to show it as 2 separate things. So on our main entrance, somebody forces the door open. That causes rule 1 to be active, and begins an incident for the main entrance. Somebody forces the door open again on the main entrance, and that satisfies rule 2 and creates our incident. But hold on, because that actually satisfies the rule 1 condition for this same incident, and that will start a new incident tree for the main entrance. So if somebody forces the door open on the main entrance, that satisfies rule 2 for the new incident that we had started, and it also satisfies rule 1 again, so we get another incident started. And if you look at the logic here, what we wanted to happen is have an incident that shows up whenever somebody forces the door open twice. But looking at it chronologically, we've only actually had 3 door forced, and that creates 2 incidents. This is really not what we want to have happen, plus the fact that it's going to keep creating new incidents over and over because it's going to keep satisfying that rule 1 condition. So what can we do about this? This is where we can use the intervals to stop the looping incidents. So on the second rule, what we want to happen is that we want the door forced open from the main entrance to happen within 1 minute of the previous door forced open event. So looking at the same series of events that came in that we looked at previously, we have our rule 1 met because we have a door forced open on the main entrance. And then within 1 minute, we also get another door forced open from the main entrance, and that satisfies the conditions for the triggers, and we get an incident created on the map for the main entrance. So this is really what we wanted to happen, but again we see that the door forced open event still satisfies the condition for rule 1, and we get a new incident created. However, our rule 2 doesn't actually happen within that 1 minute time frame, so that incident that it started going through the rules for basically gets discarded. And of course, when we get our third door forced open event, that just restarts a new incident as rule number 1. So we don't go into that looping condition, and we don't have new incidents created over and over and over by the same event. So looking at the event flow, this is exactly what we want to happen. We have our door forced open event that satisfies rule 1, our door forced open that satisfies rule 2. It happens within a minute, so we create an incident. And then we start looking for other door forced open events that happen within a minute of each other to create other incidents. Configuring trigger events in Mission Control. Let's take a look at how we can configure events for rules that happen within the trigger section of an incident. I mentioned previously that we can have more than one event that happens within a rule to actually have it considered valid. So in our example here, we can either get an access granted from any source, or we can get an access denied from any source. So these two are connected by an OR, which means that either one can happen or the other can happen and the rule will still be valid. So if we get an access granted coming in, we're good to go with the rule. We can keep going with the set of triggers, or if this is the only rule in there, it'll create the incident. And of course, if we get an access denied, that works too. We can also get a valid rule from that, and once again the incident will be created if that's the only rule in the trigger section. We can also add more than one entity to an event as well. The entity list is also considered to be connected with an OR. So in our example here, we want to get an access granted event in order for the rule to be valid, and it can either come in from the evidence locker door entity or the secure entrance door entity. So if we get our access granted and it's from the evidence locker, good to go with this rule. If we get the access granted and it's from the secure entrance, that's also a valid rule. Once again, if this is the only rule that we have in our trigger section, the incident will be created in either case. So let's take a look at combining those two, where we can have multiple events and multiple entities, and this still all counts as one rule success. So taking our previous example where we had an access granted event or an access denied event, and then we also can use both doors that we were looking at, so that's for our evidence locker or our secure entrance, then really we can have a combination of any of those to actually have the rule be active. So if we get an access granted event from the evidence locker, the rule is valid. Access granted coming in from the secure entrance, also a valid rule. Access denied coming in from the evidence locker, yep, we're good to go. And access denied coming in from the secure entrance, and once again the rule is valid. Now what's really interesting here is if we actually added the condition and we wanted this to happen twice, then any of those could happen, and it happened twice for the rule to be valid. So for example, if we had it set to occur twice, and we got an access granted on the secure entrance, that would count once. Then we got an access denied on the evidence locker, that would also count, and that would mean that our rule would be valid. Backing out and looking at the actual rules within the trigger section, they're connected by chronological ANDs. So taking a look at an example of the trigger section here, our first rule is that we want an access denied to happen twice within 30 seconds on the evidence locker door, and then we want to receive a door forced open event from the evidence locker door for the incident to be created. So the rules in the trigger list are connected by ANDs, meaning all of them have to be satisfied, and they also have to be done in a specific order. If we got our door forced open event from the evidence locker, and then we got the access denied from the evidence locker twice within 30 seconds, that would not satisfy this list of rules, and our incident would not be triggered. Taking a look at intervals, there is a small limitation here, where we can only use an interval if the previous rule did not have an interval. So in our example that we're looking at, we had a 30-second time interval set up on the first rule. So that means on the second rule, we don't have that option available. It will be grayed out if we try to activate it. Let's take a look at a couple of examples where we can set up some incidents that use triggers to activate them. So the first one we want to create is for an abandoned item. This is, for example, where we would be able to detect if a piece of luggage has been left unattended, and it could contain a potential threat. So what we want to do to be able to activate this incident is that we have two cameras in a restricted area, and if we get motion on or if we get camera tampering from either one of those, and we want to get that twice, then that should be the start of the incident. And then what we also have is an external system that analyzes the video and takes a look for any object that's in the video frame that wasn't there previously, And we have that connected to an input on one of the door controllers, so it'll actually trigger that input when it detects something, and it basically is sending an alarm to us. We have that input connected to the external system, configured to go through a zone, so it'll actually trigger an event for us. So let's start out in our incident configuration tool, and the first thing we're going to do is create the incident for the abandoned item. We have our two categories, the facilities and the public category. Now, public is something more for something that involves people and not the actual building itself. And these most likely would be manually triggered as well. So I'm going to put this under my facilities. So I'm going to right click here and I'm going to do incident. And then my new incident I'm going to call abandoned item. I'll take a look at the properties first. And of course I want to give it its own icon and give it a specific color. So let's say light blue like that. We want everybody to receive this, no sound, and we can put this as a high priority. So that's good for here. I'm going to apply this, and let's move over to our trigger section. So let's start looking at adding our events and our rules in our triggers list here. But the first thing we want to do, if we remember our best practices, is we want to deactivate this incident. Now the way we have the rules set up, the first thing we want to do is either have motion on or camera tampering twice within 30 seconds for the two cameras in the restricted area. So while we're building our triggers list and our rules here, if we put that first rule in and we got motion in the two cameras, then it would start popping up this incident on our map. So we don't want that to happen until we have all the rules in place, so that's why I've gone and deactivated it. So as you can see, we've got nothing set up for the triggers, so this would have to be triggered manually if we left it the way it was. So let's add an event. And of course, the first thing we wanted to start with was either motion on in the cameras that are in the area, the restricted area, or if we get camera tampering from each one. So if somebody's dropping a bag there and it's actually got a bomb in it, they may want to try to deactivate the cameras before they do so. So these are two different events and it's two separate cameras. So first thing we want to do is our motion on event. Let's do a quick search. Do motion on. I don't want it from any source. I want it from those specific cameras that I have in that restricted area. So click on that and then we can actually choose our cameras. I'm going to choose, whoops, that's a door. Office entrance, and I can hit the plus here, and that'll give me the option to add more cameras or entities here. And I'll put the storage room as well. So that's set up, and that's good for the first event that we wanted to come in that could satisfy the first rule, but we have the second event. So I'm going to hit the plus here, and then we get our second one, and if I do that by accident, I don't really want to do anything, I can just hit the minus here and that'll get rid of it for me. So the second event that we wanted to happen that could satisfy this rule is camera tampering. And again, we don't want it from any source. We only want those cameras that we do have set up in that restricted area. So we'll say the office entrance, and we'll add more entities here. And once again, our storage room. And then that's good to go here. Okay, so there were some additional conditions that we wanted here. The first thing is we wanted either one of those to happen twice before this rule is actually valid. So I'm going to go and I'm going to set an occurrence here. And we're going to set it to 2 times. That's fine here. And as well, I wanted an interval. So I wanted that to happen within 30 seconds. So less than 1 second. Let's be smart about this. Type in 30. So now in less than 30 seconds, and it has to occur twice, and that way the rule will be valid. Now once again, if you've set a condition and you want to get rid of it, click on the plus and you can just uncheck it from the list here. So that's my first rule that I've got set up here. This is everything I needed to do for there. So we're going to hit save. Okay, so the second rule that we want to be satisfied is that external system has noticed something in the video and it's triggered that input, which has activated the custom event in our zone. So I'm going to add another event here. I'm going to choose custom event from the list. And I want it from my specific area. So I'm going to say specific source. And I'm going to choose my abandoned item trigger zone, which just happens to be right on top of the list here. Now note in the conditions, since I used an interval in the previous step, I don't actually have that available here. So this is good to go. I can save this. Now have my two rules set up, so if they're both satisfied in this particular order, it will actually trigger my abandoned item incident on the map. I'm going to hit apply. And then of course I would set up any procedures if I need to as well. And then of course the very last step is I would go down and I would reactivate this incident type. Now let's set up another incident. And this one is going to be if we get an anti-passback violation and then we get a door forced open, but we don't want any other events to happen between them. We want those two events to happen in order and nothing else happens on that door, and we want that to happen within a minute, and that way we know that there's been a forced entry. So again, this is something to do with more with the facilities, so I'm going to create it under my facilities category. And I'm going to call this one forced entry. And like I did with the previous one, I'm going to pick my custom icon here, and let's give it a background that's a little bit more visible. Something like that. And I'll apply the changes. And then like I did for the previous one, I'm going to deactivate the incident while I'm working on it. So let's go over to our triggers here. We're going to add our first event. So this is where we want the anti-passback violation. So looking at the different options we have available, we could do it on a specific card holder, but I want to just do it on the area in general. I want to pretty much see this wherever it shows up in case there's any forced entries anywhere around the site. So I'm going to leave this as any source here. And we don't have any conditions, so basically our first rule is very simple and we've got it set up, so we're going to save it. The second thing we want to see, we're going to add the event, is we want to see a door forced open. Search for door. There's my door forced open event. And so I don't want to have this triggered from different doors and things like that, so I'm going to use the previous source. So this event has to happen from the same door that we got the anti-passback violation on. Now looking at our conditions, we mentioned that we want all of this to happen within 1 minute of each other. So I'm going to say I want less than 1 minute after the anti-passback violation. The other condition I want to add here is the event filtering. So I want no other events to happen between these two events on that particular source. So that way, if we get an anti-passback violation, but it's forgiven or somebody else passes through, the next time the door is forced open, it's not going to trigger the incident, and this incident's not going to be kept active by any anti-passback violation. Now, if we wanted to add exceptions, we could do that as well. We could choose that we want these specific events that can occur. So we could actually put our anti-passback violation forgiven here, and that could still keep the rule active even if that happens. In this case, we don't want anything to happen, so we're going to set that back to no other events can occur at the source. We're going to save that, then we can see that we've got our two rules set up. So we get an anti-passback violation on a door, and then we get the door forced open within 1 minute of the previous event of the anti-passback violation, and nothing else happens in between. Then we know that we've got forced entry, and we should trigger this incident on the map. I'm going to apply that. Once again, we can go up and we can set up procedures for this incident as well. And once we have that done, we just need to activate that particular incident. So that's just a couple of quick examples of how to set up the Triggers tab for an incident. Of course, we can add further incidents. We can make these a lot more complicated if we need to. Or we can just keep it simple like this, and that way our basic incidents will be automatically created on the map, and we're not going to have to rely on manual input so much. Introduction to workflows in Mission Control. Before we actually go into setting up workflows, it would help to know what an actual workflow does. A workflow is a series of activities that can perform actions and react to system changes while the incident is active. In terms of things the workflow can do, there's two types of activities, either incident management activities and security center activities. Incident management activities can make changes to the incident, such as changing the list column color, the priority for the incident, and the incident type, or it can be used for timing. So we can wait for an incident state to change, we can wait for a particular event to be triggered, or we can just put a generic delay to wait for a certain amount of time. Security Center activities are a selection of the more common or useful actions that can be performed while the incident is in progress. So things like sending a PTZ command, sending an email to a group of administrators, or triggering a specific alarm. So I just want to give you an idea of what the different incident management activities do. I've also listed some restrictions or best practices for these activities. So to start off, an aggregate event activity can be used when we want to basically repeat the event that happened in order to have it attached to the incident in the event history. Looking at our best practices, we want this to come right after a wait for event activity. We can use the change description activity to replace the incident description with some text that we specify. The change incident state can be used to forcibly change the incident to a specific state, regardless of its current state. Change incident type will take the current incident and turn it into the different type that we specified. Looking at our best practices, we want this to be the last activity in our workflow because it does switch to the new incident types workflow right after that. We saw how we can change priorities manually within the incident. We can actually do that within a workflow too. So if we start something at a critical priority, we might want to change it down to a high priority based on something that happens within the workflow. Close incident will of course do what it's named after and will shut down the incident for you. Remember that closing is the very last step, so that will completely cut off your incident, and this should be the last one in your workflow as well. There is a parameter within the close incident where we can actually specify a delay as well. The column color activity is where we can actually change the color of the columns in the list for this particular incident. So this is a good way of highlighting incidents during the workflow or changing the color to show the step in the process that we're at. We can also change it back to default, which gets rid of any color that we do have in the columns. The delay activity is basically a way to pause the workflow for the time that we specify. The dispatch to activity adds a user or a user group to the list of incident recipients. Now just bear in mind that this doesn't affect the ownership of the actual incident while it's in progress. It only adds recipients who could take ownership or could perform actions on the incident at this point. You can set up parallel tasks if you want various parts of the workflow to all happen at the same time. You can also specify if you want it to complete everything within the particular activity before it exits, or if just one of them has been completed. The trigger incident activity can be used to initiate another incident. We can put a comment in there, such as saying that it was triggered automatically, and you can actually specify the area where the incident occurs. Our last two are wait for event and wait for incident state. Now there's a lot of parameters within the wait for event, so when you use it, you'll see things that you want to specify, such as the event category, which is usually Security Center. You can say which event you want to wait for, of course. You can wait for any event if you want. You can put exceptions in there, or you can put something very specific. You can also designate if you want a previous event to happen first. So this is almost like setting up a rules engine within our workflow. And then of course you can specify a particular source that you want the event to come from. You can put it from anything, you can put a specific one, you can put exceptions again, and you can also put the location that the event must happen from as well. Our last activity is the wait for incident state, where we're waiting for a specific incident state, and we can use our custom ones here as well. So within the role, if we had created a custom state called supervisor approval, and we wanted to wait until the supervisor does approve it and changes it into that state, then we could actually put this in the workflow, and then it could continue after that and do various other activities. Within the Security Center activities, these are some standard Security Center actions. Of course, it's a very abridged list, not all of them are available, but we can link to other actions on an alarm, and of course we can set the alarm to auto-close after a certain timeout, so it doesn't create unnecessary alarms that are active in the system. It's not a long list, but these are the most commonly used actions that we could actually use to enhance incidents. Workflow creation in Mission Control. So taking a look at workflow creation, we're going to go into one of our incidents here. We're going to go into our bomb threat, and we're going to go over into our workflow here. So this is a different kind of interface than we're used to seeing in Security Center, and in the middle here we have our flowchart. Of course, a flowchart has to have a start that's automatically created, and when you highlight over an activity, you can see that it's got these little tabs, which we can use to connect it to other activities. So it's very easy to add activities to the list. You basically just drag and drop them. So let's say we wanted to wait for an incident state. We just drag it onto our flowchart right here, let it go, and there's the activity right there. So if I want to actually modify it, I can just double click on it, and then I get the actual details. So this is a wait for incident state. There's not a lot we need to choose here, except what our actual state that we want it to be in is. I'm just going to choose in progress for this example, and then we can either apply it from here, or on the top you can see where we actually are. So we want to get back to our flowchart. We can just hit that here, and you can see that it updated our activity with the details. And of course I can still just drag that around if I need to. And if I wanted to connect that to something, so let's say I wanted to connect it to the start and I wanted to make that my first step, I can just drag the tab down from the start and connect it to the activity. And of course this can still be repositioned, and it's going to still keep that connection there. So if you do have things that are going all over the place and you do have a lot of rules in your workflow, you could actually have them connected through the sides and things like that too. So if you want to break a connection, you can just click on it, press the delete button on your keyboard, and then I could actually set it up to come from here. And that would of course still maintain my connections if I move it around. Deleting an incident is the same way. Just click on it, hit the delete button, and that gets rid of that activity. We can also copy and paste activities. So let's say in my example, I wanted to change the column color for my incident. So I'm going to double click on that. The color, I wanted to change it to yellow, and I want it to be on all columns, or I could pick a specific one if I wanted to. And then I can hit apply and it'll show up, or I could have just clicked on my flowchart there. And then let's say, okay, I know I want to change that right off the bat, and I also want to have it further down in my flowchart. So I can actually right click on here, and you can see we've got a bunch of options here. So I'm going to copy this particular activity, and I'll go down here, right click, and do paste. And then I've got a separate new activity, and in that one I want to change it to red. So you can see they are independent as well. And that way if I wanted this to be my starting one, I can link that. I could do something like a wait for incident in between, and connect that here. And then later on, I wanted to connect that like this. And of course, we can move things around too if we want. So let's say I wanted to change it to red first. I can delete this link. I can drag this up here. Delete this one. I can select these and move them farther down the list. And then I can connect my red color activity to the start node up top here. And then of course I could have other things happen, and then we want it to go to yellow and then wait for a state. Now let's say there's something that's very common that we want to do quite a bit. So let's say we constantly want to wait for an in progress state. Then we want to change the column colors to yellow. So if this is something that we're going to be doing for a lot of different ones, what we could actually do is make this as its own independent flowchart. So let's copy these, and then we're going to add a flowchart onto our existing flowchart. And we double click to open that up. So it looks the same, but you can see we are within a sub-flowchart of our original one here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste these two steps that I wanted to recreate all the time, link them to the start, and I'm going to apply that change. Now I don't need these anymore because I do have my flowchart here, which basically does the same thing. So I can connect that here, and then I can actually copy and paste this and use it multiple times if I need to. And that way it's something where I don't have to keep recreating those steps over and over again. So you can see we can do quite complicated workflows from here, but there are tools that we can use to simplify the actual process and save time in the actual creation here too. Okay, so let's, I'm just going to erase this and let's take a look at a couple of examples. I'm going to set something up for my bomb threat, but before we do that, I want to point out that we do have a new state that I created. So if we go back to my incident manager and I go into my states, I did create one called all clear. So this is one that I want to use during my bomb threat, so I created that specifically for it. Going back to our incident configuration task, let's go back to our workflow for the bomb threat here. So the very first thing I want to do if a bomb threat incident happens is I want to change the column colors. So I want to make this incident very visible in my list. So let's make all the columns red. And let's link that to our start. The second thing I want to do is I want to send an email to all the administrators to let them know that something this important is happening. So I'm going to use a Security Center activity in this case, and I drag out my send an email activity. And I double click on that, we can see we've got other custom options here. I want to send it to all the administrators. It's giving me a warning that one of the administrators doesn't have an email set up, but that's okay. I'm going to put the subject, bomb threat, and please call the SOC. Apply, and that's here. I'm going to have that as my second step, so I'm going to connect these two together. Move that up a little bit. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to actually trigger an alarm for within Security Center as well. So I'm going to drag that over, double click on it, and I want the alarm to be the bomb threat alarm. As you can see, we could actually add other alarms here if we wanted to. So we can just pick anything from the list, and we can trigger multiple alarms at the same time. I'm going to connect that to our administrators so we can see our flow here. Now we're going to do another Security Center activity. And basically during our bomb threat, we want everybody to get out. So we're going to unlock the doors explicitly. Drag that here, put that in the flow, double click on it, and we can actually pick the doors that we have set up here. So there we go, our doors are set up, apply that, and that's a good workflow so far. Now we'll have our procedures set up. The operators are going to be going through the procedures, whatever they need to do to advise the SWAT team and to get everybody out of the building. And the doors are unlocked. We've got those things handled by the workflow here. So the next thing we want to do is we want to actually wait for our new state, which is the all clear state, just to let us know that that the SWAT team has been on site. They've either defused the bomb or they've determined it's a hoax or whatever. But basically we want to know that everything's good to go. So at this point we're going to wait for an incident state. So this is going to pause our workflow until we get that that all clear incident state. Down a little bit, link that up. Whoops. There we go. Okay, so once things are all clear, we know we're all good to go. The last two steps I want to do is I want to send another email just to let the administrators know that the situation is under control. Again, we'll get our warning. And we'll just send them a message that the bomb threat is clear. Okay, we've got that linked up. Again, it's a sideways link, but that continues the flow. That's not a problem. And the last thing I want to do is I want to change the priority down to medium. So we're still maybe getting rid of the suspicious package, and there still might be some public flow issues that we may need to take care of. So we don't want to just close it, and we don't want to put it at low, but we can change it to medium. We don't need this to be critical at this point. So this is where we grab the change priority in the incident management activities. Put that down here, link it up, and we'll change the priority to medium. There we go. So that's our workflow. That's everything we want to happen while we're actually doing the bomb threat incident. So when that incident gets triggered, the first thing it does is it starts from the top of the workflow, and it'll change the column color, it'll send the email, it'll trigger our alarm, it'll unlock the doors that we have specified here, and then it's up to us to go through our procedure, and it's waiting for the incident state until we say that we change the state of the incident to all clear, and then it's got a few additional steps that it can do, such as notifying the administrators and changing the priority. So that's a good example there that does a lot of stuff. We've got a bunch of security center ones in there. We've got some incident management activities in there too. And of course we need to apply that. Now let's take a look at something a little less scary. We're going to create an incident to let us know if a camera drops offline. Again, this is related to our facilities, so we're going to go over to our facilities category here. I'm going to create a new incident, and I'm going to call it camera offline. So in some organizations, if a camera goes offline, that could actually be a big deal, and it needs to be addressed right away. Depending on the location, certain casinos have a requirement for that, where the camera has to be on the table and has to be viewing everything at all times. I know there's certain shipping organizations that need to do that as well. So we've got our camera offline here. We're going to pick a custom icon for it, and of course I've got red in that icon, so this is really not a good color to use for the actual pin itself. So there we've got our little camera with the X over it, and I'm going to apply that. Now, depending on the severity of having that camera offline, we might want to change the priority. In my organization, it should be looked into right away, but it's not super critical, so we're just going to put it at medium. and apply that. And I'm going to set up a trigger for this. But of course, first I'm going to deactivate my incident while I'm working on it. So let's add the event, and I want the event to be transmission lost. Any source, so any camera that we get this from, I want to see this incident pop up on it. And we don't really need any conditions for this. So a very simple trigger here, and apply that. And let's take a look what we want to do with the workflow. Now, part of what we might want to use this for is actually some kind of bookkeeping to see how long it took somebody to get out and repair it. We'll have our timestamps for that, and to know when it came back online too. So the first thing we're going to do in our workflow here is we're going to change the column color. So this is make it a very obvious that there is a problem with a camera on the system. And I'm going to change that to red. Again, we'll use all columns. Apply that. That's our first step in the workflow. And then what I want to do is I want to actually wait for that camera to come back online. So I'm going to use our wait for event incident activity. And this is where, remember when I was going over the different types of activities, we've got a lot of options in here. So event category, we want this to be a security center event. If there's a third-party system that's connected, we could do that as well. The event we want to wait for is a specific event. And whoops, helps if I spell it right. And we want the transmission recovered event to come in. So I'm good with the transmission recovered, and the rest of it's okay here. So I'm just going to apply it. Now we have our wait for event, and connecting that to the workflow. And now basically it's just going to pause the workflow until we do get that, transmission recovered event coming in. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to record that transmission recovered event within my incident event list. So I'm going to add the aggregate event here. Drop that down, connect it. So this is going to basically duplicate that event that came in and log it for administration purposes. Once again, remember, we do have to put that right after the wait for event. So if we put that anywhere else, it really isn't going to do much for us. At this point, since the transmission has been recovered, we can change the column color back to the default, so we know that the operators don't have to send anybody out for that particular camera. And we have it set to default by default, and all columns here, so that's good to go. And we'll just, we have that linked. We do want to change the priority again, so since the camera's back online, let's change the priority to low. And apply that as well. And last thing we can do, since we're really just doing this for bookkeeping at this point and the camera is back online, is we can go ahead and close the incident. So let's choose the close incident from here, drop that in, link it up. And there's where we can see the timing. So we can say that we want to close the incident with 0 delays, so immediately, or we can actually say, well, let's keep it open for 5 minutes, just so somebody can see that that camera did have a problem, and if this is something that keeps coming up and somebody can actually notice that this is an ongoing issue. Go back to our flowchart. We have that here. Apply it. And now we can see we have everything that we want to do during the incident when we get a transmission lost event coming in from a camera. Our last step, of course, is to set up the procedure. And then once again, we're going to activate the incident. This concludes part 3 of our Mission Control video series. Stay tuned for part 4, where we take a look at the actual operator usage of Mission Control and how administrators can generate reports and get more information. Thank you for watching.